Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to break down Meghan Markle's Time 100 keynote interview. Now I am a little confused. If anybody knows, please help me out here. It's my understanding that the keynote speakers, some of them gave speeches, some of them did an interview format, and that was that. It was that 15 to 20 minutes, and that was the end of it. But I just want to make sure I'm not missing something, that Meghan did this little interview and then also gave a speech. So if anybody knows, please let me know, because I have researched it and all I can find is this little interview. So I don't think she also gave a speech, but I just wanted to see if anybody else knows to make sure that I'm not missing it. So as far as I know, and as far as we know, and the media has told me, Meghan did this little interview as her keynote moment, and she was one of about a dozen keynotes, I believe. Typically, in a situation like this, but with Time's lofty talk of thought leaders at their summit, you would expect the keynotes to be focusing on delivering some degree of value or inspiration, or at least be good at what they do. And then there's the Meg, who's only there because she's been impersonating Martha Stewart for a few months. And she was only given the opportunity to impersonate Martha Stewart in a Netflix show because she married Harry. Her projects have not been reviewed well, they are not performing well, and her products have not been reviewed well and are not being received well. So, she's not exactly good at what she's doing, at least not yet. There's always room for growth, right? So since she doesn't really have that going for her, then it was imperative that she try to deliver some value here. And she really didn't. The Meg was naturally far too consumed with herself and her GMPs to think strategically. This was her opportunity to explain that the show, the As Ever products, are not just some bland money grab because she couldn't think of anything else, she didn't have any good ideas, she had nothing better to do, but rather to give some sort of inspiration behind this whole year of nonsense. Meghan could have clarified some of this for us. She could have explained why she's doing all of this and what she really wants people to get out of it and why she thinks it's important. Did she deliver? No. No, she did not. Naturally. And here is exactly where she would have benefited. She would have really benefited if she had made all her As Ever goods have profits go to charity, like all profits go to charity, because she could have said that she wanted to stimulate awareness and funding for a cause, and she could have used this time as a platform to talk a little bit more about that and why it's important and stuff like that. But she had nothing good to justify this crap, and she didn't even have good answers as to why she went down this path in the first place. Like, this is not a passion project for Meghan, apparently. But even if it was, had she just owned it and sort of segued into talking about why following your passions or something like that is important in life, like, that would have been better than what we got. Anything, almost, would have been better than what happened. So her first question was, how did all of this become a business for you, Meghan? Well, she blamed someone at Netflix. That was her answer. She said that there was somebody, I didn't catch the name, at Netflix, who she had sent out some jams, and the person, Meghan did her fake yelling thing, which is my pet peeve. She goes, this person said, Meghan, there's a show here. Oh. So it's not that Meghan is particularly interested in these things. We know it's not that she's particularly skilled at these things. And it's not that she thinks it's a great benefit to general wellness, to get off screens and try to make things or learn new things. No, it's just someone at Netflix received my jam and said there's a show here. Actually, fake yelled it. They yelled it at her, I guess. I don't know, because Meghan did the fake yelling. So I don't know what happened, but they said that there's a show here. There's not. They were wrong. I can't deal with it. Also, does anybody catch the vibe? Anybody who watched this or listened to it think that maybe Ted Sarandos, the Netflix CEO, is really pulling out all the stops he possibly can to shove Meghan down our throats and try to get her some sort of positive exposure to salvage his crap that he invested in? It's not gonna work, Ted. Nobody likes the Meg. Stop trying to push her on us. Because I only think this because Jessica the woman interviewing her, CEO of Time, was like, mentioned specifically that Ted is here, that the Netflix CEO is here. And so maybe Ted pulled some strings and that's how Meghan ended up here. I don't know. Just a thought. Second question. You take care of everyone around you. Does she now? What about the royal family, who she did the opposite of take care of? She lied about and tried to, hurt them, essentially, on TV. Super crazy. But then she says, so how do you take care of yourself? Meghan's like, oh, thank you for asking. But then she sidesteps this and talks about how authentic she is, and that when you're so authentic and you're doing something for others, then it energizes you. Okay, Meghan, whatever. It doesn't hardly even make sense. She can't even deliver a normal answer to something like that. How do you take care of yourself? I don't know. Spend time with my children. Spend quality time with my kids. Go spend time outside with my kids. Do something fun like arts and crafts with my kids. I could think of 1,000 things. Enjoy movies with my spouse. Play games. Whatever. Something. No, it's just taking care of other people from such an authentic place. That's my self-care. Okay. Third question. You involved the crew a lot in the show. Netflix, I assume. And Meghan says, that was so important to me. Why? They are the crew. They literally sought out a job that was behind the camera. Probably for a reason. But also, Meghan says that her concept, her idea was to have the crew be a character in the show. So she's like explaining this. She says, I didn't want a reality show. Has she been watching us? We've been saying that Meghan wanted a reality show and it wasn't going to work. So this was her next best chance. And then she says that she also didn't want to do a stand and stir because she can't cook. So she couldn't do a stand and stir. So she said that the concept was to have the crew as a character to be able to talk to people in the room. She literally called the crew a character in her show, which is delusional. It's insane. And she actually revealed that she viewed them as props to give her someone or something to talk to. So she's basically like, yeah, I used the crew as a prop because I thought it would make me more likable and relatable. But also, it didn't work because she almost never connected with the viewer. And this style of content relies almost exclusively on connecting with the viewer and inspiring the viewer to try these things or do these things or feel like you can do these things and to get interested in them. And the way Meghan did it, where she's almost never talking to you, the viewer, made it so boring. It made it not interesting. There was no connection. There was no motivation to try anything. It just fell flat. And it made it feel really weird. Because it's so essential for shows like this. You have to prioritize the viewers at home. You just have to. It's just part of the gig. Just like other shows or other projects or other things, you have to prioritize whatever your consumer base is, right? And in this case, you just do have to cater to the viewers. So you have to try to connect to them. And Meghan being like, well, I'm just going to use the crew as props and talk to them instead, made it like this, where she never talked to the audience. And her approach actually exemplified the feeling that you're peeking in on someone else and like people watching somebody doing weird stuff, which doesn't make you want to try it. It makes you want to poke fun at it. But everybody in content creation or really anything creative are catering to an audience in some way, shape, or form. You have to, because if there's no audience for it, then it's never going to work. The fourth question was kind of breezed through, which was conspicuous, kind of obvious why. She said, oh, your products sold out really quickly. And here is where Meghan really should have said how many units she sold if she did sell a lot, because it would have been an opportunity to explain that. Or she could have said, yeah, the first launch was really small because we just wanted to see what the interest was going to be like. And I'm so grateful that there was interest. So the next batch will be a little bigger or something like that. She could have done that. But no, she just kind of was like, yeah. Because everybody honestly thinks that there was just a few dozen available, it was a big missed opportunity, but they moved right along real quickly because really what else is there to say? How do you deal with the criticism of negative reviews of your products, Meghan? Maybe that would have been an interesting question, but it wouldn't have been allowed by Meghan. The fifth question was about the podcast, and Jessica asked, what are your confessions?
Confessions of a Female Founder felt as though it was the perfect complement for what I was building at this point in my life. Between the series and between the brand,
And I have a clip I'm going to try to plug in here, which was just very illuminating.
I thought, how interesting is it to be able to listen to the conversations of someone building a business while they're doing it? And
so Jessica had introduced the podcast and then said, "What are your confessions?" And Meghan's response is that she did the podcast because she thought that her conversations would be interesting, would be what's interesting about the podcast, because Meghan was building a business at the same time as doing the podcast. Does that make sense? Like, she thought that's what would make it an interesting podcast and good, was the fact that while Meghan is building, as ever, the business, while she's doing that, she's doing a podcast. So she's having these conversations while she's putting together this business, and that's what's going to make it interesting. That's what Meghan thought. Couldn't have been more wrong. That is not what's going to make it interesting at all. And that's further tarnished by the fact that the As Ever launch was messy and the products are not received well, not doing well. So it actually has backfired most spectacularly. Then she says, she finally gets around to actually answering the question and says that her confession is that she's the happiest she's ever been. Well, that's not really a confession now, is it? A confession is supposed to be something maybe a little bit humorous, a little bit taboo, maybe something that's a little juicy even. I could only envision Meghan doing something lame, like saying, "Oh, sometimes I just wanted to give up. Or I decided I didn't care about the packaging eventually." You know, I don't know, something stupid and lame like that. But "I'm the happiest I've ever been," that's not really a confession. And it just made her seem pompous. Then, this I thought was kind of pointed towards all the drama and lies from Oprah and Netflix. Meghan said, "My kids are so joyful in the freeness and safety of the life that we've created for them." It really is hard to hear her say that without thinking that it's like a reference to, you know what, the lies and whatnot that she said about the royal family and being within the royal family, that it was so restrictive and all this. Just no. All of that was nonsense, but she has to stick with that narrative because this is the path she set herself on with her lies from the start. But anyway, it was actually really bad choice from a PR perspective to include this, because it will only remind people of her lies and her controversies from her past to throw this little tidbit in. But it definitely felt like a little bit of a dig. Not many other people have picked up on that in the media, so I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it. Leave your thoughts in the comments. The next question, number 6, was asking about how you stay focused. And this one was a little bit weird. We're talking about it in a separate video and including a clip there because it went deeper than just the initial answer. But basically, she says that she simply doesn't look online. And then the next question, number 7, Jessica says that she asked people what she should ask Meghan because Meghan gave her such strict parameters that it was really meant to just be about her projects and business. But her projects and business are boring. They're not successful. There's not a lot to say. They're also all brand new, so they haven't got that test of time to show quality and staying power within markets. And so what are you supposed to ask? There's only so much you can ask about something super boring. And so she said, somebody just said flower sprinkles, ask about the flower sprinkles. So then she asks Meghan about the flower sprinkles, much to my dismay. And Meg's like, Meghan loses her mind. She gets super hammy, super cheesy, and she's like, "You won't believe how people react with such delight at little dried flowers." And she goes on and on about it, and it's really hammy, really cheesy, really rough, cringe. And it actually contradicts herself because she just said that she doesn't go online, she doesn't know what people are talking about online, and then now she's saying that she knows online people were talking about the flowers a lot. So which is true? And then she also talks about how it's just a tiny moment of joy and blah, 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 blah. Like, she goes forever about this nonsense. And all I can think is, did no one tell her? Does she not know? People were not talking about the flower sprinkles out of joy and excitement. No, people were not loving them. They were roasting them. People thought it was ridiculous. They're not charming. They're annoying. They're stupid. People hated them. People thought they were silly. Nobody told her, I guess, because she went ham on this and thought they were fantastic and thought everybody was obsessed with them in a good way. No acknowledgement of the fact that people actually thought they were ridiculous and silly and you shouldn't be putting them on eggs or salad or anything because they're not adding anything good to the food. Like flavor profile wise, they're not helpful. But she pretty much used up her time raving about her flour sprinkles, which when you think about the actual reception of them, which was like, what are you doing? With the flour sprinkles, you're making everything look messy and gross, like some weeds blew onto the plate. Like she doesn't realize that people didn't like them, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe she only looks at positive things, allegedly. I don't know. So she used up a bunch of the time because then it was like, oh, this is over now. So the next and 8th question was, who do you want on your podcast or show that you haven't yet had? And she really didn't answer this. She literally can't think of anyone. She says basically that everyone who is on her wish list she's already had. She reveals that Jose Andres is going to be in the fall segment of the show, which remember, that is just part 2 of season 1. It is not a renewal. It is not more episodes ordered. They were all filmed summer 2024. We've been through that. But regardless, she doesn't have anybody who she can think of that she would like to have on the show. Nobody at all. Talk about not having a long game. And the 9th and final question was, what's next for you, Meghan? Well, evidently nothing, because she didn't really say anything. She just said that she was going to keep doing the same thing of spending time with family. And she did say that she was going to try to grow as ever to scale. But that was really the only thing she said she was going to focus on. What stood out to me the most was that there was no words of encouragement. There was no words of advice, no motivators for the audience or for anybody who is watching this from the perspective of like, well, I'm a female entrepreneur and I can identify with this, so maybe I'll listen to this and see what I can take away from it. Nothing like that. She didn't deliver any sort of value. And it really would have helped her if she would have come in here and took it from a perspective of, because Meghan uses language like she wants to be a leader and she wants to sort of support this dynamic of female entrepreneurs and female businesswomen, and she wants to champion women's rights causes and things like that. She always talks about this stuff. But then in practice, she never goes there. You know, because she could have really been like, I want to use this time to try to motivate people and be like, hey, if there is something that's been a hobby for you that you enjoy, think about how you can start turning it into a business. Start making the jam that you love to make. Or if people compliment your baking, start baking it and then try to get it going somehow. She could have been encouraging and motivating and talked about some pieces of advice or how she dealt with disappointment or challenges. You know, like she could have done so many things to try to really step into what she claims she wants to be, but she just didn't. So it not only fell flat and felt boring, but it once again left us feeling like when she says those things, she's just posturing. It's just words that she thinks sound good. She doesn't actually mean it. Additionally, it was obvious that the audience was having none of it, or there was almost no audience there. Couldn't tell you which, because we never got to see the audience, but it was quiet. She always does that thing where she kind of laughs and looks out to the audience with her hand out like, ah ha 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 ha, aren't you going to laugh with me? Nobody laughs with her, nobody responds, nobody reacts, because it's just lame. And she doesn't establish good connection with the audience, and she's just not very likable. Anyway. The introduction was also punctuated by the Meg saying that 20 minutes wouldn't be long enough to talk about her journey, as if she's got a lot to say or a lot to share. Please spare us. Oh my goodness. The audience is completely silent. Like, please no more dishwasher story. No more rambling about your journey, Meghan. We have heard it all many times. We don't want to hear it anymore. She also made a point to talk about giving herself grace to make mistakes and that it doesn't have to be perfect. But what that really comes down to is avoiding accountability, but also trying to put distance between herself and failures, as we've talked about before. Anytime she's saying that she's doing a project because it was someone else's idea, it's creating distance from its failure so that she doesn't feel like it was all her fault or all on her shoulders, which is actually bad business. because then you're not learning from your mistakes. When you make a mistake or a mistake happens, own it, take it in, be like, this is a learning moment for me. And I'm going to learn to avoid this in the future. And I'm not going to do this same thing. Mistakes and failures shouldn't be pushed away and rejected and pushed off onto other people. At the end of the day, if Netflix, this lady at Netflix suggested Meghan do this show because of Jam, then Meghan still is the one who was like, yeah, and failed to evaluate that idea objectively for herself. So pushing things off all the time is bad business and will prevent you from really understanding your mistakes and taking them on board and moving forward and growing, which is pretty clear that Meghan does that with everything because she doesn't grow. She doesn't evolve. She makes the same mistakes all the time. She also drives home that her business is just as important as being a parent for her. But she says kids. She doesn't say motherhood. That's my word. She says, my kids are just as important as my business. I don't get this. I don't agree. Why must people say this type of stuff all the time? I'm sorry, but no. The business, especially somebody like Meghan who is wealthy anyway, business is nowhere near as important as your kids and being a mom. Like, they're so far apart in my opinion. And maybe it is just my opinion, but I just don't think that they are anywhere close in importance. Because, like, for example, if you're spending time with your kids and something comes up with work that's like an emergency and you're like, your kids need you in that moment, you're engaged, you wouldn't drop everything and like run to work to fix it. I guess unless you're like a surgeon or an emergency responder of some kind. That's the exception. A first responder. But if you're at work and something happens with your kids, you drop everything and run to your kids. Your kids are by a lot way more important and way bigger of a priority than your business. And like I said, especially for someone like Meghan, because for a lot of people, their job and their kids, they have no choice but to be sure that they're at their job enough so that they have enough money to take care of their kids. Because, you know, it's hard out there financially for a lot of people. So for a lot of people, they have those difficult choices to make all the time. And they can't always miss work. Like if their kid is homesick or something, sometimes it's really financially stressful to not be able to take the time off or whatever. Or if they have to take the time off, it creates a financial stress where they feel like, well, I can't not have enough money to take care of my kids or keep a roof over their head and things like that. So, I mean, like there's a whole lot of people who are in that dynamic. But setting that aside, I don't think it's the right message or the right thing to say in a lot of ways that business and motherhood are the same level of importance. They're just not. And for Meghan to say that, how is that going to make her kids feel? Like, especially since her having a job is basically optional. So I don't understand why she took that approach or why she said that, because like, I just think that's not right. And that's not even a nice thing for your kids to hear. Like, you could say that you give your job or your work as much time as you possibly can because you do value it and you do find it important and it does make you feel productive and you enjoy it. But at the end of the day, your kids are still way more important than your job or your business or your jam. And Meghan could have taken a totally different, more relatable approach by being like, even when you still have a lot of help and even when you can have people help you or fill in for you, it's still juggling things. It's still something that you have to constantly find balance in. Like, she could have taken that approach if she wanted to try to say that she's making time for both. She could have done it in a way that's not like, yeah, kids and business equally as important, because no, they're not. But it really just shows that she misses every opportunity to bring in that realism that would actually be relatable, and instead she just says crazy things and doesn't think them through, and they're big PR mistakes. She also tells a story about getting a bunch of boxes and paper off Amazon and spending a bunch of time in her kitchen to evaluate the dimensions of the packages and whatnot for the unboxing moment of her products to try to make a point that she was involved in and cared about the presentation. Well, she Sort of failed at that because they all had crooked labels and the unboxing and the presentation of it was not good. But also, what did she think that the takeaway from that would be? She kept being like, I don't think that's what anybody thinks I'm doing in my kitchen. Well, Meghan, I hate to break it to you, but nobody thinks about you. Nobody thinks about you in your kitchen. Nobody cares. But she always neglects to finish her stories by bringing them back to the message that they're meant to impart. You know what I mean? Like, what are we supposed to take away from this? That you had expendable income and bought a bunch of paper and cardboard boxes to try to figure it out and created a bunch of waste. Not very good for the environment. You just did all of that for no reason. Why? Because you cared about presentation. What's the takeaway for us, really? It doesn't make sense. Also, as usual, each question gets sort of swirled into some sort of a random talking point as she's hijacking every question and eventually sort of halfway gives a semi-relevant answer at the end. But first she goes on a long meandering route that doesn't fully make sense and isn't completely just like answering the question, which isn't a good approach in this sort of a format anyway. Typically what we see is the person will answer the question more directly and more quickly, and then it leaves room for the interviewer to ask a follow-up and have a little bit of a back and forth, something Meghan does not understand at all. And you really just get the sense that she thinks that because she's done this project, that she's a CEO, and now she can talk business and lead the way for female founders just because of these 3 projects this year, and that now she is an expert at business. That's what we get the sense of. But that does not match reality at all. It completely ignores their performance entirely and the fact that these things are actually really limited amount of experience as well as really small scale. The best of CEOs, people who are really successful in business, who are viewed as business gurus, just really smart, intuitive business people, have either built or lifted really successful companies. The Meg is not in this league at all. Not in the slightest, but it's very much her MO. All of her failed one-off projects make her feel like she can call herself whatever that is. An author, a producer, podcaster, a CEO, a business lady. That she can label herself that after a one-off. Just like the astronauts. It's laughable. It really makes her look foolish. There's this 10,000 hours rule that it takes like 10,000 hours to actually get good at anything. And so Meghan is just not good at any of these things because she simply hasn't practiced for long enough. She hasn't done them for long enough. If she would have picked just one thing and honed in on it and really worked hard at it, she could be good at it. Surely. Pretty much anybody can get good at anything that they practice and try at, but she doesn't do that. She's just scattergunning this whole thing. You can't be really good at this many things, which stands to reason that she's not good at any of it because she hasn't just picked one and focused on getting good at it at all. Also, launching 3 at once was probably a dumb idea in general because it feels really unorganized and really chaotic because none of it has like a streamlined branding umbrella that it's under. But that's a conversation for another video. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a happy day ahead, and I will see you next time. Bye!